Quartermaster Brunt's location, I take it? Not that I know, sir. Funny. You'd think it'd be hard for an ogre to vanish.
It's that time of year where all the Warhammer games delay their updates to release together, and we're all left arguing which game is worth playing instead of actually playing them. Despite the confusion, there's no doubt that itemization is a big deal for the ongoing development of Darktide. While initially released a day early with half if not all of its features broken, it turns out being able to create quality weapons without wanting to snap your keyboard in half is a pretty great feature. It's a fantastic, much needed quality of life rework. Well implemented. A tad glitchy, maybe. You can now make what would formerly be considered a role blessed by the Emperor himself very, very easily. You can also obtain these absolutely horrid mastery skins. Apart from making your weapons 2% more viable than before, there's a pressing task at hand for you and the 53rd Mobian Regiment, not getting Nurgle fart-bombed by a rogue train. Much to the delight of railroad enthusiast Bully Ogren, the strike team is dropped onto the moving train, and after disarming some Tox gas bombs, the team must reach the front to bash the unliving daylights out of the control cogitators, all with some encouragement from Sergeant Major Morrow, Engine Seer KX8, and the new Commissar character Duquesne.
Your progress is not encouraging.
It's quite a short mission, with a real incentive to rush as fast as you can to the end before you get comically blown up. Evidently, now that we've made a Commissar happy, and with the ability to max level gear in a flash, job's a good one. We can all shut up now because the game is finished. Which would be terrible. They'd stop adding ambient voice signs in the Morningstar, amongst, well, I guess other things that the community has been hollering for. Return player or not, since itemization has been crossed off the list, it's easier to admit that Darktide is in a really good state. Not to say that every Darktide woe has been erased, but removing the item gambling nullifies a sizable chunk of complaints thrown at Fat Shark's head every time they make an announcement. So, now what? We're having a bit of what I'd like to call an end-of-the-line moment.
I suppose you think that was terribly clever.
Not that we've reached the development death of Darktide, I just thought it would sound cool. When it comes to upcoming content in general, Darktide is pretty hard to figure out. There may be hints as to what's next here and there, but you can never tell for sure unless you peep into the files, and even then you might be staring at stuff that will never see the light of day. I mean, how many of you guessed that we'd be seeing a new Commissar or a train level based on what we've seen before? Narratively, there are a few things that stand out to me personally. Ever since Rinda's unceremonious return in an event that had us squinting through several lights out missions, there have been questions as to why they brought her back. With almost zero reaction from Zola, who to be fair was chastised for her obsession with the Karnak twins before, what exactly was the point in revealing this cannibal weirdo now, if not to further Zola's character? Is it so we never forget the reused Heretic Captain Sword moveset for the rest of our days, or the start of something greater? In a now privated Vox Intercept, a cultist yaps about the grandfather's meaning of life while Rinda lies there half dead, pretending to care. Rinda has been experimented on by Ermal, who is the lady leader of the cult, or someone with enough influence in the cult of admonition to stow Rinda away. When we see Rinda in-game, she looks exactly the same, perhaps a little angrier than usual, but time will tell if Nurgle favours her, as according to Ermal, the gifts have yet to ripen. I don't know why I said it like that. Beyond the possibility of a mutated Rinda becoming an upcoming boss, increasing intervention from Ermal is troublesome for the warband, and perhaps a sign that Fat Shark will grace us with more insight into the cult soon enough. More peeps to talk to on the Morningstar are always welcome, and there's a slightly important lady we haven't seen face to face yet. I am of course referring to Ship Mistress Brahms, rogue trader, and all-around silly goose for making Hallowette the seneschal of her crew. You might be wondering why a rogue trader would ever nudge her heavy schedule aside to converse with a bloke like this.
A good question. For another time.
The chances are that day is way off, and so the reason I bring her up in the first place is to elucidate her hidden Morningstar hub voice lines. To put it bluntly, she mentions Brunt, the missing Ogren armourer. It's been so long since these voice lines were uncovered that I honestly thought this plotline was abandoned until very recently. After the unlocked and loaded update, there's a chance that Rannick leaves his telephone on speaker, and we all hear him asking Morrow where Brunt is. Thanks to Brahms, we know that he's in the Deep Hive, and that we'll be going down there at some point to give the sweet old brute a visit. It would be nice to assume that he's simply living his best life, far away from the horrors of war. Alas, it's the opposite, as Deep Hives generally aren't the friendliest places to be. Since only about 5,000 peeps have seen this Brahms video, I thought it worth mentioning. As the mission to save the Mobian 53rd and its Commissar leader Duquesne ends quite abruptly, I would have believed that they were a temporary addition to Darktide, if not for the sight of Duquesne prowling the kindergarten-sized enclosure Rannick has gifted her. If her main residence is now the Morningstar and not a highly contested Hive City train station, we can look forward to a Commissar leading Vox comms in future missions. From the sound of it, she's one of those peeps who are fed up with Rannick's dragged-out warfare, so I can imagine her leading the charge to hit the heretics where it hurts. If our barber can sneak some rejects down into the Hive, so can she. Those are the main things I can see happening in the near future of Darktide, within reason. But enough theory crafting based on evidence. It's time to subliminally project my will into the devs' minds, like how I convinced them to write Bully Ogren train voice lines for the new mission. In all seriousness, while I have an enormous bias towards characters, and honestly just hearing my favourite voice actors yell at each other, the main attraction of Darktide is its wicked gameplay, not random voice line additions for those few attentive players. Besides, they're always supplementing the game with new lines every other update, dragging VAs into the London studio every other, well, probably few months. What's 10,000 voice lines more, right fellas? The fact that we have a bloke called Swagger whose entire purpose now is to stand next to Hadron and harass her signals to me that the floodgates are practically open. All those requests that are definitely totally being worked on could happen at any moment. Even the crazy stuff like expecting another map to be released before the year is done and dusted. New maps are always in demand. We want to see the depths of Hive Tertium. We want to see the dainty greens on Spireside Gardens. Who knows where the Inquisition will take us next. Though I think it's important to remember that maps in Darktide aren't just a standalone effort from the level designers, usually packaged with music from this guy, character interactions, and a narrative or a thematic reason for being there. Likewise, Fat Shark needs a thematic reason for plonking new weapons into our rejects' hands. Otherwise, I imagine it gets the Games Workshop IP protected seal of disapproval.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
Right now, if you pull up a picture of the weapon pool in front of Ogren mains, then you won't get much of a reaction. At least, in my mind, they are hypothetically weeping at the lack of choice. So yeah, new weapons would be nice and are likely being slow-cooked while the crew figures out a way to appease their GW representative gods. Now we get to the more wish list theories that are about as likely to happen as KX8, remembering what IV nutrients he had for lunch the day before. In good old Deep Rock Galactic, you spawn in your ship much like Darktide. It's a place to muck around in, and I don't mean abusing emote bugs to slide around. In this hub, you can go to a bar and drink an assortment of gut-bursting beverages before dropping down into the planet. As a feature, you retain some of the effects gained from drinking dwarven alcohol, leading to moments that'll make you say, wow, this is really cool for the first 5 seconds, but now I feel genuinely motion sick. What I'm trying to say is a dedicated area to hang out on the Morningstar would be a swell, if not borderline pointless waste of resources on Fat Shark's end, but well, they're probably used to that by now. We've barely scratched the surface of the Tertium plot. Heretic leadership such as Wolver live carefree. Ermal has only just been unveiled, and the 2 dweeb twins have been dealt with, only for one of them to come back a year later anyway. I have a feeling that we're stuck with Nurgle and its goons for the long haul, which is the exact kind of sentence those expecting a new faction don't want to hear, but what are you gonna do? At the rate things have been released, it's looking grim and dark for peeps who are fed up with the unshowered masses of Atoma. Those who crave foes with slightly bigger foreheads, or people who hyperfixate on the words of a psyker who has so far proven to be nothing but a gigantic trickster. As one of the most highly requested additions to the game, a massive boon to replayability, and another reason to hear Jesper's rendition of 40k music, Fat Shark is most likely on the ball already with this sort of thing. It's just a matter of time. And that's pretty much all I'm going to share without looking completely off the walls. I went a little bit into the narrative reasoning, which I hope wasn't too confusing, as I know many folks don't have a clue what the story of this game is. Take it all with a grain of salt, as like I mentioned before, Darktide has a history of releasing things without teasing them whatsoever. Thanks for listening to me ramble, and I'll try to keep the Darktide stuff coming, even if the MOBA parasite has its wicked hold on me.
I forgot what we're doing.
As the mission to save the Mibians must be saved.